Welcome back to Pulse of the Planet, bringing you the latest news from around the world. On September 16, 2025, the United States Supreme Court delivered a decision that reverberated through Washington and the global economy. The ruling was not just another legal footnote, it was a seismic event that sent shockwaves through the corridors of power, from the White House to Wall Street, and even to trading partners around the world. In a landmark ruling, the court struck down President Trump's global tariffs, declaring them an unconstitutional overreach of executive authority. The decision was the culmination of months of legal battles and intense public debate, as businesses, lawmakers, and citizens anxiously awaited the outcome. The justices concluded that the president had wielded a power, the power to tax, that the Constitution reserves for Congress. This fundamental principle, rooted in the nation's founding, was at the heart of the court's reasoning. This was a pivotal check on the modern presidency, reasserting the separation of powers at the heart of American democracy. The ruling reminded the nation that no single branch can act unilaterally when it comes to such sweeping economic measures. The court ruled that imposing broad-based tariffs under a national emergency required clear authorization from Congress, which was absent. Without explicit legislative approval, the executive branch could not act alone, no matter the urgency or political pressure. The decision invalidated not only the recent tariffs, but also earlier duties imposed under similar justifications. This sweeping reversal sent ripples through international markets, as trading partners scrambled to adjust to the new legal landscape. For Americans, the ruling meant relief from rising prices and economic uncertainty, as tariffs had driven up costs on everyday goods. Families, small businesses, and manufacturers all felt the impact, and many welcomed the court's intervention. Yet the decision also sparked heated debate about the future of trade policy and the role of the presidency in times of crisis. Some argued it would tie the hands of future leaders, while others saw it as a necessary safeguard against executive overreach. But it also forced a national reckoning over the limits of presidential power. The conversation extended far beyond legal circles, touching every American who wondered how government decisions affect their daily lives. The Supreme Court's decision reached far beyond the courtroom, reshaping the balance of power in American governance and setting a precedent that will echo for generations to come. The road to the Supreme Court began in April 2025, when President Trump unveiled the Liberation Day tariffs, imposing blanket duties on nearly all imports. Citing the trade deficit as a national security threat, the administration invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law never intended for such sweeping economic measures. Critics argued this was a direct violation of the Constitution, which grants Congress, not the president, the power to tax and regulate commerce. Businesses and lawmakers from both parties warned of economic chaos, higher prices, and retaliatory tariffs. The administration defended the move as necessary to protect American jobs, but opponents saw it as a dangerous overreach. This fundamental clash set the stage for a high-stakes legal battle over the very nature of executive power. The legal fight over the controversial tariffs didn't start in the halls of Congress or the White House, nor did it begin with powerful lobbyists or national headlines. Instead, it began quietly, in the heart of America's small towns and cities, with small businesses blindsided by the sudden imposition of tariffs. Companies like VOS Selections and Learning Resources, which had built their livelihoods over decades, suddenly faced layoffs, mounting losses, and the looming threat of closure. Desperate to survive, these businesses joined forces with a coalition of states, pooling their resources and resolved to challenge the tariffs in federal court. Their legal argument was straightforward but powerful. Under the Constitution, only Congress has the authority to impose taxes or tariffs, not the president acting alone. The U.S. Court of International Trade, after careful consideration, ruled against the administration, finding that the president had overstepped his legal authority. The Federal Circuit Court swiftly upheld this decision, invoking the major questions doctrine, a principle that says sweeping economic changes require clear approval from Congress. The courts concluded that imposing such broad tariffs would fundamentally alter the nation's economic landscape, and that the IEPA did not grant the president this sweeping power without explicit congressional consent. Unwilling to accept defeat, the administration appealed to the Supreme Court, escalating the case and raising the stakes for the entire U.S. economy, as well as the delicate balance of power between the branches of government. During oral arguments, justices pressed both sides, probing the limits of presidential authority and the role of Congress in shaping economic policy. In a remarkably swift decision, the Supreme Court affirmed the lower courts, bringing a dramatic end to the saga of the Liberation Day tariffs and setting a powerful precedent for future administrations. The ruling was more than just a legal victory. It was a resounding affirmation of constitutional checks and balances and a reminder that, in America, no one is above the law. Central to the Supreme Court's decision was the major questions doctrine. This doctrine requires clear congressional authorization for executive actions of vast economic and political significance. The court found that the IEPA's broad language was not enough to justify sweeping global tariffs. The ruling reaffirmed that Congress, not the president, must make major policy decisions, especially those involving taxation. The decision signaled an end to using vague emergency powers for transformative economic policies. Future presidents will need to work with Congress for major initiatives, restoring democratic accountability. The court's application of the major questions doctrine has reshaped American governance, reinforcing the separation of powers. The Supreme Court's decision unleashed a tidal wave of financial consequences. Up to $1 trillion in tariff refunds became owed to importers, creating an unprecedented liability for the U.S. Treasury. Processing these refunds will take years, leaving businesses in limbo and straining government resources. The loss of tariff revenue blew a hole in the federal budget, forcing Congress to consider spending cuts, tax hikes, or more debt. For businesses, the end of tariffs promised lower costs and relief from inflation, but the abrupt policy shift created new uncertainties. Companies that had adapted to the tariffs now faced another round of adjustments. The ruling highlighted the volatility of U.S. trade policy and left many wondering what would come next. The financial aftermath underscored the far-reaching impact of the court's decision. The Supreme Court's ruling marked a turning point in the balance of power between Congress and the presidency. By striking down the tariffs, the court reasserted Congress's constitutional authority over taxation and trade. The decision limits the president's ability to use emergency powers for broad economic policies without congressional consent. It forces presidents back to the negotiating table, strengthening the deliberative function of democracy. The ruling dismantles the unilateral approach of the America First agenda, requiring legislative backing for major trade actions. This shift promises a more predictable, law-driven trade policy shaped by Congress. Ultimately, the decision reinforces the checks and balances envisioned by the Constitution's framers. The immediate aftermath of the ruling brought confusion and volatility to markets and businesses. Investors and analysts scrambled to interpret the implications, while stock prices swung wildly as uncertainty rippled through the financial sector. The sense of unpredictability was palpable, with many unsure how to respond to the sudden shift in policy. Companies scrambled to reverse supply chain changes made in response to the tariffs, adding costs and complexity. Many businesses had spent months, even years, adapting to the previous rules. Now they faced the daunting task of unwinding those adjustments. This meant renegotiating contracts, rerouting shipments, and recalibrating production lines, all while trying to minimize disruptions to their operations. The government faced the daunting task of refunding billions in tariffs, diverting resources and prolonging financial strain for businesses. Processing these refunds required significant administrative effort, and many companies worried about when, or even if, they would see their money returned. The uncertainty added to the financial pressure already weighing on the private sector. The loss of tariff revenue forced Congress into tough budget debates with no easy solutions. Lawmakers clashed over how to fill the sudden gap in federal funding, debating whether to cut spending, raise taxes, or borrow more. The political tension added another layer of instability to an already fragile economic environment. For consumers, the end of tariffs offered hope for lower prices, but relief would take time to reach store shelves. Retailers and suppliers needed to work through existing inventories and renegotiate supply contracts before any savings could be passed on. In the meantime, shoppers remained cautious, watching prices and waiting for signs of change. The ruling introduced a new layer of economic uncertainty, affecting everyone from corporations to families. Households worried about job security and rising costs, while business leaders weighed the risks of new investments. Small business owners in particular faced tough choices about staffing and expenses as they navigated the shifting landscape. The transition period will be challenging, but the decision aims to restore stability and predictability in the long run. Policymakers hope that, over time, businesses and consumers will regain confidence and the economy will adjust to the new reality. The nation now faces the task of navigating this new economic landscape, working together to overcome obstacles and seize new opportunities as they arise. The Supreme Court's decision is a defining moment for American governance. By limiting emergency powers, the court has reshaped the future of U.S. trade policy and the balance of power in Washington. Major changes to trade laws must now go through Congress, promising greater stability and predictability. The ruling compels presidents to work with lawmakers, leading to more moderate, carefully considered policies. It sets a precedent for limiting executive overreach in other areas, from climate policy to public health. The decision affirms the enduring strength of America's system of checks and balances. This turning point will shape the exercise of power and the course of American democracy for generations to come.